In 1968, a psychologist walked into an elementary school in San Francisco with a fake test. He told the teachers it was a scientific instrument, a Harvard-developed tool that could identify which children were on the verge of a sudden intellectual bloom, which kids were about to get dramatically smarter. He tested every child in the school. Then he handed the teachers a list of names. "These are your bloomers," he said. "Watch them this year." Then he left. 8 months later, he came back, and the children on that list? They had genuinely gotten smarter. Their IQ scores had jumped, significantly, measurably, in ways that couldn't be explained by normal development. Here's the part that should stop you cold. The list was fake. He had picked the names completely at random. Those children had no special potential, no hidden genius waiting to surface. They were just ordinary kids pulled out of a hat. But their teachers had believed otherwise. And that belief, that single, quiet, unspoken expectation, had changed what those children actually became. The psychologist's name was Robert Rosenthal. And what he had just proven would go on to disturb educators, managers, parents, and scientists for the next 50 years. He called it the Pygmalion Effect. To understand why this is so unsettling, you need to understand where the name comes from. Pygmalion was a sculptor in ancient Greek mythology. He carved a statue of a woman so perfect, so beautiful, that he fell completely in love with it. He dressed it in clothes. He brought it gifts. He spoke to it every day as though it were real. And eventually, because this is mythology, the goddess Aphrodite took pity on him and brought the statue to life. The point of the myth isn't magic. The point is that Pygmalion's belief was so total, so unwavering, that reality eventually bent to meet it. Rosenthal borrowed that name deliberately, because what he was describing wasn't mysticism. It was something far stranger. Expectation, he had discovered, is not passive. It doesn't just sit in your head and wait. It reaches out into the world and reshapes it. But how? How does a teacher's private belief about a child somehow physically alter that child's brain? This is the part nobody talks about clearly. Because it's not telepathy. It's not magic. It's something much more human and much harder to escape. Rosenthal spent years studying the mechanism. And what he found was that expectation leaks. It leaks through tone of voice, through eye contact, through how long you wait after asking a question, through the micro-expressions that cross your face when someone gives a wrong answer. Teachers who believed certain children were gifted smiled at them more, called on them more, waited longer for them to find an answer instead of moving on, gave them harder problems, gave warmer, more encouraging feedback when they failed. None of this was conscious. None of it was deliberate. The teachers didn't even know they were doing it. But the children felt every single bit of it. And children, especially young children, are extraordinary at reading adults. They know, without being told, which adults believe in them. And they calibrate their own self-image accordingly. A child who is treated like someone capable of brilliance starts to act like someone capable of brilliance. They try harder. They persist longer. They take risks. They ask questions. They develop what psychologists call a growth identity, the deep, bone-level belief that their intelligence is not fixed, that effort leads somewhere. A child who is treated like someone not worth the effort learns something too. They learn to be exactly what the adult seems to expect. The expectation didn't predict the outcome. It created it. Now here's where this stops being about classrooms and starts being about everything. Because Rosenthal didn't stop at schools. He ran the same experiment in the US Army. Instructors were told that certain soldiers had exceptional aptitude. Those soldiers outperformed everyone else, trained faster, showed greater initiative. The soldiers had been selected at random. He ran it in corporations. Managers told that certain employees were high potential, invested more in those employees. More coaching, more responsibility, more opportunity. Those employees became higher performing. He ran it in therapy. Therapists led to believe certain patients were highly treatable, showed better outcomes with those patients. More patience, more creativity, more persistence. Every single time, the same result. The belief of the person in power shaped the performance of the person beneath them. Rosenthal gave this a precise name, the four-factor model. Climate, input, output, feedback. The four invisible channels through which expectation travels from one person to another. Climate, the emotional warmth you radiate toward someone. Input, how much material, challenge, and opportunity you give them. Output, how much you actually let them respond, perform, and contribute. Feedback, how specifically and generously you respond to what they do. Change those four things, and you change the person, without saying a single word about what you expect. But there's a shadow side to this, and it's darker than most people are willing to look at directly. If high expectations can lift people up, low expectations can lock them down. This is called the Golem Effect, named after the Jewish legend of the Golem, a creature of clay that destroys what it was meant to protect. In study after study, students who were subtly signaled as low ability performed worse over time, not because they were less capable, but because the climate, the input, the output, the feedback all quietly told them they weren't worth the investment. Teachers called on them less, waited less time for answers, praised them less specifically, gave them easier work, and interpreted their failures as confirmation rather than information. And the students, reading all of this perfectly, concluded something about themselves. Something that wasn't true. Something that then became true. Think about what this means at scale. In a classroom with 30 children, a teacher forms an impression of each child in the first 2 weeks. Those impressions, built on clothing, on names, on accents, on who their older sibling was, calcify into expectations. Those expectations then spend the next 10 months quietly shaping who each child becomes. And this doesn't end in school. Your manager has an impression of you. Your partner has an expectation of you. Your parents formed a story about you before you were old enough to argue with it. How many of those stories are accurate? And how many of you have spent years becoming the character someone else wrote? There is one more thing Rosenthal found, and this one I think about the most. He studied what happened when children were told, explicitly, directly, clearly, that they were capable of more than they had shown. Not vague encouragement, not empty praise. Specific, genuine, evidence-based belief. I've read your last 3 essays. The thinking in them is more sophisticated than you realize. I want you to try something harder. Children who received that kind of message didn't just perform better on the next task. Their relationship with difficulty itself changed. They started seeking out challenges instead of avoiding them. They stopped interpreting struggle as evidence of failure and started interpreting it as evidence of effort. The expectation had become internal. They had taken someone else's belief in them and made it their own. This is the real mechanism of the Pygmalion Effect. It's not that belief magically improves performance. It's that belief changes the story a person tells about themselves. And people, almost without exception, live up to, or down to, the story they believe they're in. So here's what you do with all of this. Think about the last time you formed an impression of someone quickly. A new colleague, a student, a child, a partner, a stranger. Ask yourself honestly, did that impression close possibilities or open them? Because here is what Rosenthal proved beyond any reasonable doubt. Your expectations are not private. They are not neutral. They are not just thoughts you have in your head that stay there. They travel. They land. They build or they diminish. They write the next chapter of someone else's story whether you intend to or not. Pygmalion didn't bring his statue to life through skill. He brought her to life through the sustained, unshakable belief that she already was. The people around you are not statues, but the principle is the same. What you believe about them is already shaping who they're becoming. The only question is whether you're paying enough attention to do it on purpose.